My name's Ryan. I'm 28, and last weekend was supposed to be one of the best days of my life. After years of working two jobs, eating instant noodles, and living in a cramped apartment with paper-thin walls, I finally bought my first house. Nothing huge or fancy. A modest three-bedroom with a little backyard and a creaky porch swing. But to me, it was perfect. It was mine. No landlords, no roommates, no one telling me what I could or couldn't hang on the walls. I signed the closing papers on a Thursday and immediately started planning a housewarming for Saturday. It wasn't going to be extravagant, just some snacks, a few drinks, and a chance for everyone to see the place I had worked so hard for. I spent Friday night cleaning, arranging furniture, and even stringing up cheap fairy lights in the living room to make it look warm and inviting. There was this giddy, nervous excitement in my chest as I pictured my parents walking in and smiling, my younger brother cracking a joke about how I finally had a kitchen big enough to burn toast in, my cousins laughing and exploring all the rooms. For once, I thought, we'd be together for something I accomplished, not for one of my brother's endless milestones. My brother, Matt, is 26. He's the golden child, no other way to put it. Growing up, he got the praise, the new clothes, the soccer trophies displayed in the living room. I was the quiet one, the kid who figured out how to fix things around the house so Dad didn't have to call a plumber. I didn't mind most of the time. Matt was more outgoing and charming, so it made sense he got more attention. But as we got older, the favoritism became harder to ignore. When Matt got a promotion, the whole family went out to dinner. When I graduated college, my parents sent a congrats text with a thumbs up emoji. I told myself I wouldn't let that bitterness ruin my housewarming. This was about celebrating something good. The morning of the party, I woke up early, practically buzzing. I set out drinks on the counter, made sure there were enough chairs, even bought a cake that said, "Welcome home, Ryan," in blue icing. I sent a group text reminder. "Hey everyone, housewarming starts at 5. Can't wait to see you." My phone stayed quiet except for a single thumbs up from my cousin Sarah. I shrugged it off. Maybe everyone was busy getting ready. 5 o'clock rolled around. The lights were on. Music was playing softly from a Bluetooth speaker, and I stood by the front window, waiting for the first car to pull up. By 5:30, no one had come. By 6 o'clock, I was pacing around the kitchen, checking my phone every 30 seconds. Finally, I opened Instagram out of boredom, and that's when I saw it. My entire family was tagged in a photo, standing in my parents' driveway, grinning ear to ear in front of Matt's brand new car. A shiny black luxury SUV with a giant red bow on top. My mom's caption read, "So proud of you, Matt. You deserve this." Comment after comment from relatives said things like, "What a beauty," and "Congrats, champ." My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen for a long moment before I set my phone down and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cake I'd bought. The house felt unbearably quiet, the fairy lights suddenly looking silly and sad. I didn't cry, though. I just sat there and let the disappointment settle in, like a heavy blanket I couldn't shake off. Around 7:15, just as I was about to start packing up the food, my phone lit up with Mom's name. I hesitated, then picked up. "Ryan," she said without even a hello, "we need to talk about the house." Her tone wasn't congratulatory. It was serious, clipped. For a moment, I thought maybe she was going to apologize for missing the party, but something in her voice made my chest tighten. "What about it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We think it would make sense if Matt stayed there during the week," she said matter-of-factly, as though she was talking about borrowing a lawn mower and not my entire house. I blinked, stunned into silence. "You just bought it, sure, but his job is closer to that area and he needs a place to stay during the work week," she continued, as if the logistics were already settled. "You wouldn't even notice. He'd just sleep there, maybe keep some clothes in one of the rooms. It's only fair to help him out, considering how expensive his car was." I didn't say anything at first. My fingers dug into the edge of the table as I stared at the glowing cake across from me, its frosting still perfectly smooth and untouched. "Mom," I finally said slowly, "this is my house. I worked for this. And we're proud of you." She replied quickly, like she was checking a box. "But family helps each other. Don't be selfish about this." I swallowed hard, feeling a strange mix of anger and disbelief simmering in my chest. As she kept talking, explaining why it just made sense for my younger brother to essentially take over my new place, I found myself looking around my empty living room. The one I had cleaned for hours, the one no one had shown up to celebrate. For the first time, it hit me that this wasn't just a thoughtless request. It was something bigger, something that had been building for years, and if I gave in now, it would never stop. I took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch as my mom waited for me to agree. My heart was pounding, my hands still clenched around the phone, and all I could think was, they had skipped my housewarming to celebrate my brother, and now they wanted the house too. And that's when I decided something, but I didn't say it yet. I just said, "We'll talk later," and hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty doorway, my mind racing. Something inside me was shifting, hardening. Because if they thought this was going to be easy, they had no idea what was coming next. After I hung up, the house felt even quieter than before. I walked to the living room, turned off the fairy lights, and sat on the floor with my back against the couch. It wasn't just about them missing my housewarming anymore. It was about everything. Years of feeling like I was second place, like every milestone of mine was just a footnote in someone else's story. I thought about how Mom used to keep Matt's soccer jerseys framed in the hallway, while my college degree was still sitting in the box it came in. The next morning, I woke up to 6 unread messages in the family group chat. The first one was from Mom. "Ryan, we really need to discuss Matt using the house." The next was from Dad. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." My stomach twisted. It wasn't just a request anymore. It was an expectation. Then came a message from Matt himself. "Hey bro, Mom said you're being weird about this. Chill. It's just a couple nights a week. I'll bring my own food." I stared at that text for a good minute before tossing my phone onto the bed. Just a couple nights a week. Just. That word made me want to laugh, bitterly. It wasn't just a couple nights a week. It was me giving up my privacy, my space, the one thing I had worked so hard to get. By noon, Mom called again. This time I let it ring, but she immediately followed up with a voicemail. Her voice was sweet, almost rehearsed. "Ryan, honey, we just want what's best for everyone. Matt has so much pressure right now. He needs support. You know how stressful his job is. We're counting on you to do the right thing." I played the message twice, my jaw tightening each time. It was the same tactic as always. Make me feel guilty until I agree. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house because I didn't want this to spiral over text. When I pulled up, Matt's new car was still in the driveway, gleaming like it had been washed just minutes ago. I knocked on the door and Mom answered, looking pleasantly surprised, like nothing was wrong. "Ryan, finally," she said, pulling me into a quick hug. "Come in, let's talk about the house." I stepped inside, glancing around. Dad was sitting in his recliner, flipping through the mail. Matt was on the couch, grinning like this was all some kind of joke. "So," Mom began, sitting down across from me. "We've been thinking." "You mean you've been deciding?" I interrupted, my voice calm but flat. She blinked, clearly not expecting me to cut in. "Deciding? You already told Matt he could stay there, didn't you?" I asked, glancing toward my brother. Matt shrugged, not even looking guilty. "Well, yeah, I figured you'd be fine with it." That was the moment something in me clicked. It wasn't just that they had asked me. They had already made the decision for me. My opinion, my ownership of my house, didn't seem to matter at all. "You can't just decide that for me," I said slowly, keeping my voice level. "This is my home. You don't get to hand it out like it's an extra bedroom in your house." Mom's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Ryan, we're not trying to take anything from you. This is family. You have a responsibility to look out for each other." "I have been looking out for everyone for years," I said, my voice rising slightly despite my best effort to stay calm. "I helped pay for Matt's tuition. I loaned him money when he wrecked his first car. I even fixed your washing machine for free when you said you couldn't afford a repairman. At what point do I get to have something that's just mine?" The room went quiet for a beat. Dad finally looked up from the mail, frowning. "Don't take that tone with your mother. She's just trying to keep this family together. By taking my house." I shot back before I could stop myself. Matt rolled his eyes. "You're being dramatic. I'm not asking for a key to the safe, just a place to crash. I thought we were closer than this." The manipulation was so obvious, it almost made me laugh. Matt wasn't the one making sacrifices, I was. He was the one everyone catered to, and I was expected to smile and make it easier for him. "I'm not agreeing to anything today," I said finally, standing up. "I need time to think." Mom stood too, looking frustrated. "Ryan, don't make this into a bigger deal than it is. If you keep dragging this out, Matt will have to spend money on a rental, and that's just wasteful. I didn't say anything else. I just left. That night, I got another message, this time from my aunt. Hey, I heard about the house thing. Don't be selfish. Matt really needs the help. I stared at the message, realizing that Mom must have called half the family to tell them her version of the story. Suddenly, I wasn't just dealing with my immediate family. I was being painted as the villain to everyone. The next day, Dad showed up at my house unannounced. I was sitting on the porch when he pulled into the driveway. He didn't even say hello. You need to stop making this so hard, he said, walking up to me. This isn't a big deal. Your brother has always been there for you. I almost laughed. Always been there for me. When? When I worked double shifts so he could borrow money for spring break. Or when I had to take the bus because he totaled my car and you said we couldn't afford to fix it. Dad's face tightened. You're keeping score now? That's not what family does. I stood, finally feeling the anger boiling over. No, Dad. What family doesn't do is take advantage of one kid just to make life easier for the other. He didn't like that. He muttered something about me being ungrateful and left without another word. For the next few days, the messages kept coming. Guilt trips, little digs, subtle threats about how disappointed they were in me. Each one was like a brick being added to a wall between us. By the end of the week, I had stopped replying entirely. But I wasn't just sitting in silence. Every night, after work, I'd sit at my kitchen table with a notepad, thinking, if they were willing to push this hard before Matt had even stayed a single night, what would happen if I gave in? Would they start telling me what furniture to buy, what room he could have, what nights he'd be there? No, I wasn't going to let that happen. I didn't know exactly how I was going to handle it yet, but one thing was certain. The next time they came to me about the house, I wouldn't be caught off guard. And judging by the message I got from Mom that Friday, we're coming by tomorrow to talk. Be home. That time was coming sooner than I thought. I closed my phone, took a deep breath, and looked around my house. The house that was mine. For the first time in days, I felt something sharper than sadness, resolve. If they wanted a conversation, they were going to get one. Saturday morning came with an uneasy quiet. I woke up earlier than usual, not because of an alarm, but because my mind wouldn't let me sleep in. Mom's text from last night echoed in my head. We're coming by tomorrow to talk. Be home. It wasn't a request. It was an order. I tried to distract myself by tidying up, but every sound in the house felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboards, even the distant sound of a neighbor's lawnmower. Around 10 a.m., a car door slammed outside. My stomach tightened as I peeked through the window. Sure enough, my parents were walking up the path to my front porch, Matt trailing behind them with a cocky grin and a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I opened the door before they could knock. Morning, Mom said briskly, brushing past me like she owned the place. Dad followed, looking grim, and Matt walked in last, glancing around like he was inspecting the property. Nice place, he said casually, setting the duffel bag down by the couch. I frowned. What's that? My stuff, he replied with a shrug. Thought I'd save us all time since we already know how this is going to go. That single sentence made my blood run cold. They hadn't just come to talk. They had come to move him in. Mom turned to me, clasping her hands together like she was about to deliver good news. Ryan, we've thought about this a lot. It just makes sense. Matt's commute is brutal, and this house is sitting here with extra space. Why wouldn't we make use of it? I crossed my arms, my pulse starting to quicken. Because it's my house. And you didn't ask. You just assumed I'd go along with it. Dad sighed, already looking impatient. Son, this is a practical solution. Stop being so stubborn. Matt flopped onto the couch, pulling out his phone like he was settling in for the afternoon. I don't get why you're making this such a big deal. You've got 3 bedrooms. You'll barely even notice I'm here. I stared at him, then at the duffel bag on the floor. The sheer audacity of it hit me all at once. They hadn't just ignored my feelings, they had already decided for me. No, I said finally, my voice firm. Mom blinked. No, no, I repeated, louder this time. Matt's not staying here. Not for a night, not for a week, not at all. For a split second, there was silence. Then Mom's expression hardened. Ryan, don't be ridiculous, she said sharply. We drove all the way here. Matt took time off to get ready for this. You're not going to embarrass us by making a scene. I felt my chest tighten. Making a scene? You showed up to my house with his bags without my permission. You're the ones making a scene. Matt finally looked up from his phone, smirking. Wow, Someone's touchy. You really think this house makes you the boss now? That was the last straw. Get your stuff and leave, I said quietly, my hands shaking. Mom gasped like I had just cursed at her. Ryan, you are not kicking your brother out of your house. Yes, I am, I snapped. Because this is my house, not yours. And you don't get to decide who lives here. Dad stood up, towering over me. Watch your tone. We raised you better than this. I laughed, a short, humorless sound. You raised me to put everyone else first. To pay for things I couldn't afford so Matt could have what he wanted. To work twice as hard just to get half the recognition. Not this time. The room went silent except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Fine, Mom said after a long pause, her voice cold. If that's how you want to be, we'll do this the hard way. Before I could ask what she meant, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. She dropped it onto my kitchen counter with a loud slap. What is this? I asked, walking over and opening it. My heart sank as I saw what was inside. A printed out listing for my house, complete with mortgage details, property value estimates, and tax information. We've spoken to a lawyer, Mom said matter-of-factly. Technically, you're not married, and you don't have kids. This house is wasted space on you. We think it's in the family's best interest if Matt eventually buys it from you. I stared at her, stunned. You want me to sell you my house? Not sell. Transfer, Dad corrected. We'd work out a fair arrangement. You'd still have a place to stay for holidays. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. They weren't just asking me to let Matt stay here temporarily. They were openly plotting to take the house from me entirely. This is insane, I said finally, my voice quiet but shaking. You skipped my housewarming to celebrate Matt's car, and now you're standing in my kitchen trying to take my house. Mom crossed her arms. Stop acting like a victim. You bought a house earlier than we expected. You should be happy you're in a position to help your family. Help. That word again. Help always meant me giving something up. Matt leaned back on the couch, smirking. Honestly, bro, you're overreacting. You've always been good at bouncing back. You'll be fine. I felt something in me snap. Not anger, not even sadness, just a cold, crystal clear resolve. Get out, I said, my voice low. Mom's eyes narrowed. Ryan, get out. There was a long pause, but something in my tone must have gotten through because Dad finally grabbed Matt's bag and shoved it toward him. This isn't over, Dad said as they headed for the door. I didn't answer. I just stood there, my fists clenched, watching them leave. When the door finally closed behind them, I let out a long, shaky breath. My hands were still trembling, but I wasn't scared anymore. No, I was done being scared. Because if they were willing to go this far just to control something that was mine, then I needed to start thinking 3 steps ahead. I needed to stop just defending myself and start making a plan. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just going to say no. I was going to make sure they never tried anything like this again. The house was so quiet after they left that I could hear my own heartbeat. I sank into one of the dining chairs, staring at the folder they'd left on the counter. The papers sat there like a threat, like proof that I wasn't imagining how far they were willing to go. I flipped through the pages again, this time more carefully, mortgage data, property tax estimates, even notes in Mom's handwriting. One of them read, "Ask about adding Matt to title?" My chest tightened. I stayed at that table for hours, not moving, barely blinking. Part of me kept waiting for my phone to buzz with an apology. A call, a text, anything to say they realized they had gone too far. But when it finally did buzz, it wasn't an apology. Mom had written, "I hope you're happy. Your father is furious. Matt is staying with friends tonight, but this is only temporary. You're being selfish and short-sighted." I read the message 3 times before putting the phone face down. It felt like someone had pressed all the air out of me. My own family thought I was selfish for not handing over the only thing I had worked years to get. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the moment they walked in, the duffel bag thumping against the couch, the way Matt had smirked like he had already won. My housewarming decorations were still up, the cheap fairy lights, the welcome cake sitting untouched in the fridge, and looking at them now made me feel almost foolish, like I had been naive for thinking they'd be happy for me. The next few days were worse. The silence from my family wasn't peaceful, it was loaded. They didn't call to apologize, but words started trickling in through cousins and extended relatives. My aunt texted me, "You really upset your parents. They said you kicked them out." Another cousin chimed in, "Why are you being so hard on Matt? It's just a house. Just a house. I stopped responding. I stopped checking the family group chat altogether. I muted it and left my phone on the counter, face down. I went to work, came home, sat in the dark living room, and just existed. The place that had felt so alive and full of potential just a week ago now felt heavy, like it was carrying their disapproval in every corner. Even sitting on my own couch felt like a fight, like I had to defend my right to simply be there. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat on the back porch. The yard was quiet except for the chirping of crickets, and for the first time, I let myself really feel everything at once. The sadness, the anger, the exhaustion. I had spent years being the good son, the one who kept the peace, who helped out, who sacrificed. And now, the first time I drew a line, they made me out to be the villain. I thought about all the little moments I had brushed off before. The times Matt had borrowed my car and returned it empty on gas. The times I'd covered his share of bills and gotten nothing but a shrug in return. The birthdays they had forgotten, the job promotions they had barely acknowledged. Maybe I had been ignoring it for too long. That was the night I decided to stop waiting for an apology that was never coming. The next morning, I started locking everything down, literally and figuratively. I changed the locks on the house, not because they had a key, I hadn't given them one, but because the idea of them showing up unannounced again made my stomach churn. I updated the alarm system password. I started keeping my car in the garage, out of sight. I also started pulling back from the family in other ways. I stopped showing up for Sunday dinners. When Mom called, I let it go to voicemail. When Dad texted, I left it on read. I didn't explain myself, didn't argue. I just went silent. At work, people started to notice I was quieter than usual, but I poured myself into my projects. Staying late wasn't a burden, it was an escape. The office became the one place where I didn't feel judged or pressured to justify myself. But every night, I came home to that same empty house, and every night it reminded me why I had to do all of this. One Saturday, about a week after the confrontation, I drove out to a quiet trail just outside of town. I hadn't been hiking in years, but something about being out there, surrounded by trees and fresh air, helped me think clearly. I sat on a rock overlooking a small stream and pulled out my phone. I scrolled through old photos, Matt's graduation, Matt's first car, Matt's birthday dinners, and noticed how many of those moments I had been the one behind the camera, taking pictures of everyone else celebrating. There were hardly any photos of me. I had been present for everyone else's big moments, but when it came time for mine, they couldn't even show up. By the time I stood up and started walking back down the trail, something inside me had solidified. I wasn't going to fight them for scraps of respect anymore. If they wanted to paint me as selfish, fine, I would let them. But I wasn't going to be manipulated into giving them what they wanted. And as I walked back to my car, I realized something else. I didn't just want to protect my house. I wanted to protect my peace. That night, I sat down with a notepad at the kitchen table, the same spot where I had been sitting when Mom called me that first night. This time, though, my mind wasn't foggy. I started writing down everything I needed to do, financially, legally, emotionally, to make sure no one could take this house from me. I made a list of lawyers in town. I looked up what it would take to put my house into a trust. I checked into tenants' rights and property laws, just in case. And as I sat there, making plans in the quiet, I felt something I hadn't felt since before this all started: control. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was the first step toward taking my life back. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because if they thought I was going to keep rolling over and letting them decide my future, they were in for a shock. Once I started writing things down, it became easier to breathe. The list on my notepad was long, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks: direction. Instead of sitting around waiting for the next guilt trip message, I now had a plan. The first step was talking to a lawyer. It felt strange making an appointment to discuss something as serious as property protection, but the attorney I met with, a calm, sharp-eyed woman named Allison, made me feel like I was finally on solid ground. I explained the situation carefully, leaving out as much of the raw emotion as I could, and asked what could be done to make sure no one could challenge my ownership. Allison nodded thoughtfully, scribbling notes as I spoke. "You've done everything right so far," she said. "Your name is the only one on the title, so no one has any claim to it. But if you're worried about interference, there are options, like putting the house into a living trust in your name. or setting up a legal notice preventing any transfers without your approval. It was the first time in this whole ordeal that someone had told me I had power, that I had the ability to keep what was mine safe. I left her office with a folder full of documents and a checklist of steps to take. At work, things were starting to shift too. I had been volunteering for extra projects partly to distract myself, but now I realized those late nights were getting noticed. My boss called me into her office one Thursday afternoon and said, "Ryan, you've been knocking it out of the park lately. I want you to lead the next client presentation." Normally, that would have terrified me, but for the first time in months, I felt ready for it. I threw myself into preparing, staying late to polish every detail of the presentation. The day of the meeting, I walked into the conference room in my best suit and delivered the pitch with a calm confidence I didn't know I had. By the time I finished, the client was nodding enthusiastically. That afternoon, my boss pulled me aside and said, "If we land this contract, you'll be in line for a raise." It wasn't just about the money, though that would help. It was the validation. I was being seen, appreciated, recognized for what I brought to the table. I started to notice other small changes too. I began going for runs in the evenings instead of sitting on the porch stewing. At first it was exhausting, but after a few weeks, I found myself running farther, my lungs burning less, my head clearer when I got home. The anger that had been sitting in my chest started to feel like fuel instead of a weight. My social circle, which had felt painfully small for so long, began to grow again. One weekend, a coworker invited me to a barbecue at his place. I almost said no, but something in me knew I needed to go. I showed up with a six-pack and found myself laughing with people I barely knew by the end of the night. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was living in Matt's shadow. I was just Ryan, a guy with a decent job, a house, and a life that was starting to take shape. But as good as things were getting, the silence from my family didn't go away. Every so often, Mom would leave a voicemail. "We miss you, Ryan." Or, "Your brother's been struggling, you know." But there was no apology, no acknowledgement of what they had tried to do. I still hadn't unmuted the family group chat, and part of me wondered if I ever would. One Friday evening, after work, I went to a local hardware store and bought some paint. I had been staring at the bland beige walls of my living room for weeks, and I finally decided it was time to make the space mine. It took me all weekend, but by Sunday night the room was a soft, warm blue, the kind that made the whole house feel calmer. I strung up new lights, rearranged the furniture, and hung up a framed photo I had taken on my hiking trip. Standing there in the middle of the room, paint on my hands, I felt something shift. This wasn't just a house anymore, it was my home. And no matter what my parents thought, they weren't going to take it away from me. The next step on my list was financial. I met with a banker to set up a separate savings account, one that no one in my family even knew existed. I started automating transfers every payday so that I could quietly build a cushion. Part of me was thinking about the future, about travel, about maybe starting a side business. But another part of me knew I might need that money for whatever was coming next. Because I knew this wasn't over. One evening, while I was eating dinner and scrolling through my phone, I saw a new post from my cousin Sarah, a photo of Matt at a fancy restaurant, grinning over a steak the size of a dinner plate. The caption read, "Celebrating a big move." My stomach tightened. I knew that grin. It was the same one he wore when he had walked into my house with his duffel bag. Sure enough, the next morning I got a message from Dad. "We need to talk. Call me." I didn't call. Instead, I went back to my list.